Okay, welcome to the second session on Bereshit. Today we're going to talk about, yesterday we talked about creation, the Garden of Eden, and today we're going to talk about mostly about Noah, but we're going to also talk about the two sons of Adam, Cain and Abel. All right. And we're going to talk about him because there's an important story there. So I'm going to get out my my notes because I compiled quite a few notes to share with you, but I'm going to share them with you afterwards because I find that it's good. We're getting somebody else now. I find that if people are too busy reading, then they don't listen as well. So it's actually better for you to just listen, and then I'll send you the notes and you can read them and you go, oh yeah, I remember he said this, but how come he didn't say that? So then that will generate questions. Okay. So whoops. No, I can't do that. Here we go. Okay. So one of the themes that we're going to see throughout this book, I don't know whether it will come as a surprise to you or not. It's the whole concept of covenant. Covenant is central to the entire Tanakh, the entire Old Testament, if you will. Every major development involves a change of the covenant, a transformation, actually, of the covenant. But the covenant is always between God and humanity, or some subsection of humanity. And I'm going to put into the chat right now some links that I think I hope will be useful to you, that you can look up. One of them is a paper that I wrote a number of years ago. I was so fascinated by this development of covenant that I actually tracked down all of the different covenants that had occurred in the Bible, and then I went into the Quran and did the same thing in the Quran. So this document represents that compilation of those results. I think it also has, yes, it has on the covenant of Christianity too. See, there's a covenant in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as well as the Baha'i faith. And actually, Baha'u'llah says in the Kitab-i Aqdas that there's a covenant for every one of the religions of God, because it's a structural component of religion, of that formal connection that we have with our Creator. Now, if you look at your you look at the meeting chat, and you'll see, I think it's 3 or 4 documents. One of them is my paper. Another one is a link to a website that has very interesting materials in it that we'll get to. I'll talk about those in a few minutes, that actually are not necessarily about covenant. And then another one is the perspective on covenant from a Christian point of view. And it's well done. It's really well researched, well written. I thought it's good for us to look at different viewpoints. So those are there. You can go to the chat, copy them over to your computer, and then look at them at your leisure. Okay. So back to my other screen. So we have major characters. The first major character in the book of Bereshit that we're studying is Adam and Eve. Actually, all of the characters are couples because whether the wife is mentioned or not, in many cases she is. Without the wife, husband, and wife, there are no descendants. And this is a history of descendants of a long series of family relationships. So the first two children of Adam and Eve were Cain and Abel. And Cain was the firstborn. And he was a tiller. He was an agriculturalist. And his brother came along next, Abel, and he was a herdsman. There are lots of things that are extremely interesting about these two because they represent the two major populations of Israelites. They also, at this point in the evolution of humanity that they're talking about, because this is another thing it's perspective that you get from reading the Bab and Baha'u'llah that you won't get in any other place. And that is, before Adam, there were other Adams. What? Yes. Baha'u'llah actually writes about this in a tablet that the Guardian translated in Gleanings. If you do a word search on Gleanings, or even, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but you can go to Baha'i Reference, or you can even go to Baha'i.com. You look for the writings, they're published by the World Center. You find Baha'u'llah. You look at the list of books by Baha'u'llah, you pick Gleanings. Then you put into the search, you put in Adam. You'll get it instantly. You will find this quote. In this quote, somebody asked him, how about the prophets and the peoples who existed before Adam? Now, how about that for a perspective? That's not something that Jews, Christians, or Muslims ever talk about. That's something Baha'is are going to be talking about forever because it's right there in our scriptures. And then Baha'u'llah proceeds to talk about the languages of revelation that were used of the prophets since the time of Abraham. He doesn't talk about before Adam. He says that the traces of those previous prophets and their civilizations have been destroyed. And there are a couple of different references to this in the writings. One of them is a reference, of course, to the flood at the time of Noah, because Noah is recognized as a prophet, but also as being the one who he and his family basically rebooted the human population after everybody else had been wiped out. So to return to Cain and Abel represent these two different ways to support yourself. One is keeping animals, being a herds person, I guess you'd call it, of sheep in this case. The other one is to grow products, grow vegetables and fruits. And there is an extensive back and forth between Cain and Abel that's talked about in the Quran. And it's also, of course, talked about in the book of Genesis. And what happens to these two brothers is they become jealous of each other. And the firstborn feels that he hasn't been treated properly. So instead of going and complaining to his dad, saying, how come you're not treating me with the same respect that you're treating my brother? And instead of complaining to God, who accepts his brother's sacrifice, but doesn't accept his sacrifice, instead of complaining to God, he kills his brother. And then when he's asked, what happened to your brother? Where's your brother? He says, am I my brother's keeper? In other words, I'm not responsible for him. Why are you asking me? This is such an interesting principle because it underlies everything that Baha'u'llah teaches. We are responsible for each other. If we weren't, then we wouldn't have religion at all. The whole point of religion is to remind us of how we need to take care of each other. And the fact that we can't just take care of number one. And this was, it's mentioned in the Quran in a number of passages, and I'm going to be sending you a document that shows you all of those passages so you can read them for yourself. It's also mentioned by Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Iqan, of course. That's where we're normally going to get material that has to do with prophets of the past. And I'm also including a link for you to read because I think I found it extremely interesting and I think you would too. And that is, there was a man named Jawdat Said who was a Circassian Muslim who lived in a village that was just across the border from the Golan Heights, the current Golan Heights. In fact, at one point, Israel occupied that territory, that particular village, and he comes from that village. And he lived in various places around the Middle East, and then he went and spent the last quarter of his life or so in his village, living off the land, being a farmer and a beekeeper and so forth. But he was a great scholar of the Quran, and his writings on the Quran are an absolute treasure, because one of the things that almost no commentators on the Quran have ever understood is that Muhammad is making peace between people. Instead, they see it as a call to war to go and fight the whole world until everybody becomes Muslim. That's how it was interpreted by most Muslims and is still today, except those who live in, Western countries where they're being influenced by their neighbors. Well, Jawdat Said spent a whole lifetime trying to get Muslims to actually read the Quran in a different way. And so his major treatise on this subject is about Cain and Abel. And it's based right on the Quranic story, which duplicates the story in Genesis perfectly. So I found it fascinating. I think you will too. And it segues right into the statement of Baha'u'llah on the subject of these two. The next person we come along to, by the way, Cain and Abel, they're discussed in chapters 4 and 5. Okay, chapters 4 and 5 of Genesis. Then the next person that's of real consequence, I mean, they're all important because if they weren't around, if all of them weren't around, then the ones that were really outstanding would never have come into existence. It's all a family. So the next person in the family that's of real importance is somebody who's hardly mentioned at all. It's so interesting. I'm going to read to you the verses that refer to him. Okay? It says, and this is the 5th chapter of Genesis, verse 18. 18 through 22. And Jared lived 162 years, and he begat Enoch. And Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years, and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, because God took him. Now, why is this important? Well, the text isn't going to tell us why it's important. What's going to tell you that it's important is because Enoch, the way that Enoch was understood by later generations of Jews, we're talking millennia of Jews, and Christians and Muslims, is why it makes it important. Now, I'm going to provide links to you so you can look to a whole lot of this stuff and get the details for yourself. You see, Enoch was understood by Jews for many, many centuries in pre-modernity. In other words, before the modern age, before the 20 maybe the 19th century. He was regarded as a mystic and a prophet. He's not designated a prophet in the Genesis, but he's regarded as being a mystic, a man of uncommon knowledge, and probably a prophet. Okay, well, you could say, well, okay, so people make things up. So I guess they made that up, right? Because it's not in the Bible. Well, the trouble with that is that there's a lot that's not in the Bible. There are a huge number of non-canonical books that didn't make it into the Bible. They wouldn't include them. And there have always been Jews who were interested in the non-canonical books, so they preserved them. And because they preserved them, they were studied, and they came to be appreciated by many Jewish writers, many Jewish thinkers. And because all of the first Christians were Jewish, all of them, they knew about Enoch. And they knew about Enoch from the perspective of these generations, like thousands of years, of regarding him as a prophet and as a mystic. And there are various versions of the book of Enoch, which is attributed to him. Again, non-canonical, didn't make it in the Bible, but it's been very widely read. There are versions in various different languages. And we in the 20th century have more versions than anybody ever had before. Because in 1945, in a very remote location in Egypt called Nag Hammadi, there was a discovery of huge vessels, like I guess you would call them jugs, but they were really big, like 6 feet high and like 2.5 feet around. And they were filled with manuscripts. And it's conjectured that the manuscripts were put in there for safekeeping and hidden from the Orthodox people that didn't want those things to be in existence anymore. Well, they were found in 1945 and they've been gradually published. And we have hundreds and hundreds of documents that are mentioned by historians, Jewish and Christian historians, but we never seen them before. But they quoted from them in some of those accounts, and so you'd be able to verify that it says it's the book of Enoch, and it's written in Coptic, let's say, which is an ancient Egyptian language. Well, there are people who know Coptic, and there are people who can compare the Coptic version with the Greek version, and the Greek version with the Arabic version, and there are multiple versions. So we have that information. Still, I haven't convinced you that this is important at all, and I understand. There is a quotation in the Epistle of Jude in the New Testament. Now, all those books in the New Testament are canon. They've all been accepted by all Christians as valid, as scripturally valid, as true, as, pretty close to the same idea of infallibility that Baha'is have about Baha'u'llah. There is a quotation in this Epistle of Jude that refers to a prophecy of Enoch, and it says it's fulfilled by Jesus. Okay, so that means that early Christians knew of this and wrote it down, and there were other Christians who read it and said, yeah, I'm familiar with that. That's real. All right. So there's that 2 layers of interesting. There's the interesting that it was taken seriously by Jews. Then it was taken seriously by Christians. And then it was taken seriously by Muslims. Now, how would they do that? Well, it turns out that Muslims have a character, a personage in the Quran named Idris. And Idris is described in the Quran as a prophet and a messenger. A prophet and a messenger. Nabi and Rasul. And so Idris, so what has that got to do with Enoch? Scholars of Islam were sure that Enoch and Idris were the same person. They went even further. There's a very mysterious fellow who wrote some mystical texts named Hermes Trismegistus. They said it's Hermes too. It's the same guy. Hermes, Idris, Enoch, same guy. Okay? Now, all of this could also be sort of like, well, why is that relevant? It's relevant because Baha'u'llah refers to Idris in at least 2 tablets. One of the tablets he refers to, that there's a reference, is the tablet of wisdom, Loy Hikmat, which is in that collection of the writings revealed after the Kitab-i Aqdas. And he's talking in that tablet about someone he calls Balinus. Well, Balinus was a philosopher, mystic, and healer who lived just a little bit after Jesus. And we know about Balinus because he had a biographer who did a really good job of writing a biography. So there's a whole lot of detail on how he lived his life. In fact, we know a lot more about what he did than we know about what Jesus did. Historians take this very seriously and they think that it's accurate. Well, so does Baha'u'llah, by the way. So Baha'u'llah is referring to Balinus, who is known as Apollonius of Tyana. And what does he say? He refers to Idris. And he says the first one who taught divine wisdom was Idris. And he was also called Hermes. See, so here you have Enoch, apparently a Jewish fellow, descendant of Adam, and you have Baha'u'llah saying he's real, he's a prophet, he founded philosophy. In one of his tablets, he said he founded the whole realm of philosophy, which is how, by the way, philosophy is what people used to call what is called today science. There were two kinds of philosophy. There was material philosophy and there was divine philosophy. To use the words that were used by the Western tradition, there was physics and there was metaphysics. Aristotle wrote on both of these subjects. In the Tablet of Wisdom, in the Law Hikmat, there's a great deal of discussion by Baha'u'llah about how philosophy, and in particular, metaphysics, came into existence. It's fascinating. I don't want to get off on a tangent. I'm thinking about doing a whole course just on that because there is so much detail about it in the writings. So you have Idris, who is Hermes, who is Enoch. And this is the person who's regarded as being responsible for bringing into existence science as we know it, science and philosophy as we know it. So this is why it's really important for us to study these scriptures carefully, is because when you go and you look at the layering that comes after the initial revelation, you find out all kinds of things. And I'm not talking about layering that's invented by Tom, Dick, and Harry. I'm talking about things that come from manifestations of God. The next person we have after Enoch is Noah. And Noah, it's interesting, all of those descendants of Adam take up 2 chapters, including Cain and Abel. They take up 2 chapters. And of course, Enoch, as I showed you, is only a few verses. Noah takes the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th chapter, 4 chapters for one person. Why? Why is he so important? Well, he's so important because he cited something happened on Noah's watch, which had a huge impact and which is referred back to by the Jewish prophets, by Jesus. Yes, Noah's talked about, and the flood is talked about by Jesus. And in quite some detail in the Quran. There are many verses in the Quran that refer to Noah. And then there's Baha'u'llah. Now, Baha'u'llah, I'm going to just read the passage that everybody is somewhat familiar with, probably. Among the prophets was Noah. This is Kitab Yagan. For 950 years, he prayerfully exhorted his people and summoned them to the haven of security and peace. None, however, heeded his call. Each day they inflicted on his blessed person such pain and suffering that no one believed he could survive. How frequently they denied him, how malevolently they hinted their suspicion against him. Thus it hath been revealed. As often as a company of his people passed by him, they derided him. To them he said, though ye scoff at us now, we will scoff at you hereafter, even as ye scoff at us. In the end ye shall know. That's a quote from the Quran. Long afterward, he several times promised victory to his companions and fixed the hour thereof. But when the hour struck, the divine promise was not fulfilled. This caused a few among the small number of his followers to turn away from him, and to this testify the records of the best-known books. These you must certainly have perused. If not, undoubtedly you will. Finally, as stated in books and traditions, there remained with him only 40 or 72 of his followers. At last, from the depth of his being, he cried aloud, Lord, leave not upon the land a single dweller from among the unbelievers. Another quote from the Quran. And now consider and reflect a moment upon the waywardness of this people. What could have been the reason for such denial and avoidance on their part? What could have induced them to refuse to put off the garment of denial and adorn themselves with a robe of acceptance? Moreover, what could have caused the non-fulfillment of the divine promise which led the seekers to reject that which they had accepted? Meditate profoundly, that the secret of things unseen may be revealed unto you, that you may inhale the sweetness of a spiritual and imperishable fragrance, and that you may acknowledge the truth from which time immemorial, even unto eternity, the Almighty hath tried and will continue to try his servants, so that light may be distinguished from darkness, truth from falsehood, right from wrong, guidance from error, happiness from misery, and roses from thorns, even as he hath revealed. Do men think when they say we believe, they shall be let alone and not put to proof? Another quote from the Quran. So this passage beautifully summarizes the main points in the story of Noah that are conveyed both in Genesis and in the Quran. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it touches upon the main points, and it gets to the major theme, which is things happen that people did not expect, that a manifestation might even have said that something else would happen, and then there's a change. Why is there a change? And people are tested by that. Their faith is tested. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that is an opportunity for them to go deep inside and find out, do I really believe this or not? Am I going to let a little change that happens destroy my life of faith, my confidence in the trustworthiness of the Creator and of the manifestations that speak for him? This is a major point. It's a major point. It's a sticking point with every one of the religions of God. The manifestations all encounter this because most of them are rejected. Let me put it this way. All of them are rejected, but most of the people reject them. That has been true every single way. It's one of the major themes of the whole Kitab Yagan is that don't expect that the manifestation of God is going to show how valid his claims are by convincing everybody, because it's not going to happen. Most people are going to oppose him, and then it's only over the course of time that gradually people come to accept his claims, and even those have to be tested at the moment of death, as Baha'u'llah says in the Kitab Yagan. It's only at the moment of death that they're going to find out, and God's going to find out, who is the true believer. Because very often we may live a lifetime, with certain convictions, but they are not deeply rooted. And when the test comes and you're going to the next world, that's when you find out what you really believe. So I wanted to address a couple of things because I know that this was bugging Terry. And I don't know if Terry is here. Is Terry here? Let's see. No, Terry's not here. But Terry's probably going to listen to this. He's going to listen to this or he's going to want to get an answer to his question. So I'm going to answer his question, okay? So his question was this. What's this thing about he lived for 950 years? Nobody lives for 950 years. Did people back then live for 950 years? First of all, Baha'u'llah's writing to somebody. That person believes that whatever is in the scripture is true. He probably believes that most of it is true literally. Well, if you go back and you look at the Bible and you look at what it says about Noah and how long he lived, it's right here in black and white. It tells you exactly. It's right here in the Bible. See? I'm going to go and find that passage. I'm going to read it to you. Just give me a second here. All right. This is in the 9th chapter. It's the 29th verse. And all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. So where did Baha'u'llah get that? From chapter 9, verse 28. 29, sorry. That's where he got it. Okay? Why would he cite it? Interesting. Why would he cite that passage? Why would he cite that number? Well, it's actually a big deal on that. All of these individuals who were described among the generations after Adam, they tell them how many years they lived and had until they had this son, and how many until they had that son, and then how many did they live in total. Every single one of them is written like that. So if you're used to thinking that way, that the chronological order and the number of the years they lived is important, Baha'u'llah is going to tell you just what you need to win your confidence that he's telling the truth. Now, if we want to go back to this passage and say, do Baha'is believe that Noah lived for 950 years? No, of course not. Because that means something else. We don't know what it means. Maybe someday some really brilliant student of the Bible will figure out what it actually means. But we know that it doesn't mean literally 950 years, because human beings have been living about the same life span for as far back as we've found human remains. And I'm talking about 3 million years. There's another reason. It's even in scripture. It's really an interesting fact that in scripture it's stated that human beings will only live for 120 years. Now you might have heard this before. I certainly heard it bandied about, but I didn't know where it came from. And then I was reading, in preparation for talking with you, and I came across this passage, and I thought, isn't this fascinating? It says, because here it was right in the midst of statements about how many years this one lived and that one lived. And it said 120 years. Now you're waiting for me to give you that information, so I'm going to give it to you. Okay? It's chapter 6, verse 3. It says, God is limited the duration of a man's life to 120 years. Okay? So these years mean something else, and we don't know what they mean. And what is the whole point here? What does Baha'u'llah say? What's the punchline? The punchline is it's all about testing. It's about trying or testing. It means the same thing. Testing our faith. If we're going to let little things like the number of years in somebody's life to stand between us and having confidence in God, that's a problem. That's our problem, not his problem. Now, there's a lot of material that I collected on Noah that I think will be more interesting for you to read for yourselves. So I'm going to share with you this document, and I'm trying to think about the best way to do this because I don't want to create new documents each day. What I'd rather do is have one Google Doc, which I share with everybody. Now, is that a possibility for all of you? If I give you a link to a Google Doc, do you have access to Google Docs? Can you do that on your home computer? Hold on a second. I want to hear something from you, so I have to unmute you. Let's see. How do I unmute? That's a tricky thing.
I'm unmuted.
Oh, you're unmuted. Good. Maybe you're all unmuted.
You can unmute yourself.
What?
You can unmute yourself.
Oh, good. All right. So, our Google Docs, is that a way for you to do this, or do you really need me to make a Microsoft Word document and then I can email it to you? You tell me.
You could
For myself, I don't know anything about Google Doc. It might be something I need to learn, but I don't know anything about it.
you're a messenger on Facebook. Or maybe I'll do a call with. I've done it with some other Baha'is on Facebook.
On Facebook?
I do have a robot in the other room. Have you ever heard of LEQ? She's made in Tel Aviv, Israel. So I think it could actually call you over LEQ if you had your phone number. I'd ever call you, she'll give you an app. You download that app, and I've done it with my sister and somebody else. The name's
Okay.
Now, are you running Windows on your computer?
I actually have a tablet.
Yeah, you have a tablet, but do
Yeah.
you have Windows 365?
Um,
No? I'm seeing shaking heads.
I
Well,
don't know.
the thing is, if I send you a Word document, can you open it?
Yes.
Then you have Word. If you didn't have
Okay.
Word, you couldn't open it.
Okay.
So if you have Word, and I'm not discounting what Ralph might have a better idea, but if I go up to my screen, if I do it right now, you can do it right now, and I go to my email, okay? Gmail, I've got a Gmail account. Do you have a Gmail account? Does everybody have a Gmail account?
Let
No.
me put it on.
What?
I have a Gmail account. I can put it here. I actually Zooming with President O'Leary in Australia. What you talking about? He's been battling stage 4 colon cancer. So he's doing Mr. Belusi's book. You remember
Oh,
Baha'u'llah?
yeah.
And that's really interesting because President, I think, was in Iran. He was talking about Baha'u'llah when he's 12 years old in Iran, but he left Iran and went to, and he went to India. Now he's in Australia. His name is Permanent Deliri.
Well, we've got all kinds of treasures out there. So if you don't, why don't I do this just for simplicity's sake?
Okay.
I will copy, I will copy a link to this document, and I want you to try to get it to work. Okay.
Okay.
The
All
link
right.
sounds like the easiest thing, but if you're looking for immediacy, that's more work for you to
No,
to send
the
emails
link is
to.
something, the link I can do bingo. I can do it right now while I'm talking to you. It's going to go in the chat. Okay. Just going to put it in the
Okay.
chat right here. There you go. Now, anybody who goes and uses this link is going to get to the document that I'm in the process of writing. And so I'm going to continue to
okay.
write on it. I'm going to add new stuff every day.
Okay.
So as we go into further chapters and talk about other characters, those people will show up.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
I have a question. You did not mail
Yeah.
anything yesterday, did you?
No, I didn't email anything yesterday. No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, I didn't, because I didn't have time to clean up my formatting and it was too messy.
That's
So
okay.
whatever I did yesterday, I'll clean it up and I'll give it to you tomorrow.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I
You know,
didn't lose it.
my wife can't stand when people come over to the house and she hasn't had a chance to vacuum.
Right.
Well, I feel the same way about my documents.
Right.
You
Understand.
know? I don't mind so much if I don't vacuum, but I sure mind if people look at my stuff and it's a mess.
You're right.
Peter, while you're allowing us to speak, why I understand the testing and the but then why mention all this stuff in the first place? If it I mean, the dispensation goes what 500,000 years? So why even mention it now if it's just a test of saying, "Okay, I believe you." What's the point of not understanding what the 960 years means? What's the point of not knowing the 7 days uh, and 6 days and on the seventh day? What's the point of not knowing the answer if it doesn't enlighten you?
Oh,
It's
yeah, but
testing.
Okay, so that's a good question. That's a good question. Are reliable sources of really completely reliable sources of information have been gradually disclosed to us through the centuries, right? It's called progressive revelation. And it's actually worked that way with science too, and with art, and with a lot of other things, is that human consciousness has expanded. It doesn't expand perpetually. It expands and it contracts and it expands and contracts. Now, as far as why is it important to understand these things? If we don't have confidence that we can understand the writings of Baha'u'llah, if we don't have confidence that we can understand the scriptures, the writings of the previous manifestations, how are we going to teach people? How are we going
But then
to
where
get
the
their
answer?
confidence?
How do you that I'm sorry, I'm kind of pulling in the question from yesterday. How do we become enlightened to the answers? And then what is the relevance of the answer?
What's the relevance of the answer?
If
So
we
the
can't get
relevance,
to it,
yes, but
like
you
if we
can
can
get
get
to
to
it.
the answer, that's one thing. And then if we can't understand the answer, what's the point?
Yes, but our understanding is limited by factors that we have no control over, and then factors over which we do have control, right? Now, one of the things that we Baha'is have control over is that we don't have to accept the situation that we find ourselves, in my case, 50 years after I became a Baha'i, of not knowing really fundamental things about my own religion. Really fundamental things. It's like, I don't have to accept that because I haven't read a lot of the writings. So I said, Peter, get off your tush and read the writings. And then when you don't understand something, ask questions. Who do you ask questions of? Abdul Baha, Chogi Effendi. They answered a lot of questions because there are people like me and you who ask those questions. So they answered them. But not just that. We can ask the questions of Baha'u'llah, because you could read something by Baha'u'llah the first time and not get any of it. I did that. I know this from personal experience. I remember being a
We all
19-year-old
do.
boy and reading Gleanings and going like, I don't understand a single word of what this man is saying. Okay. I don't get it. So how is that supposed to be feeding me spiritually when I don't understand it? You know what was missing? I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have a Baha'i who had the experience, who'd lived with the writings, who had deepened the faith in the faith, and who could give me some pointers on how to find it out for myself. Because you got to find it out for yourself. That it's all comes through our own brains and our own hearts. You know, none of this learning is actually learning that's outside. You encounter stimuli outside, and that stimulates something inside of you. And then you do the work internally, and you go, oh, so that's what it means. Unless you have an aha moment, you didn't ever understand it. The words just went right over your head. And I know I've been there so many times, but I've gotten to the point where honestly, I could pick up this book. This is Gleanings. I could pick up Gleanings and open it anywhere, and I feel like he's talking to me. I don't just understand. I understand without any problem at all. And why? There are lots of reasons why. One is I'm familiar with his language now. I know how he talks. You know, when you're talking to somebody and they have a really strong accent that you're not familiar with and you can't figure out what the guy's saying. And you talk with them long enough and you figure out, oh, that's what that word is. And eventually you understand what he's saying, right? So I speak like 5 languages. I've been through this many times. I start out as a beginner. I don't understand anything the person's saying, except maybe "niet." I would, um, but I mean, for example, I lived in Israel for 4.5 years. I had to go and buy food at the shuk, at the market, open air market. I had to speak some Hebrew. I didn't have to speak perfect Hebrew. I had to speak Hebrew to get the job done. Okay? So I also sang in synagogue. I had to know how to pronounce the words, and I had to know what enough of them meant for it not to be a meaningless exercise. Learning by doing. It's the only kind of learning that exists. So to go back to this, why is it important for us to understand Baha'u'llah? Because he's the messenger from God. If we don't understand him, and what is that? That just, now, if there are some people who are cognitively impaired, and maybe they could read Baha'u'llah for their whole lifetime and they're not going to get it. But I'm not even sure I believe in that, because I have seen so often my little children respond to something I say that I got from Baha'u'llah, and they get it. They get it. And they're tiny. And why do they get it? Because they have pure hearts. They have pure hearts. They don't have heads full of a whole bunch of mishmashed ideas that we've accumulated for a lifetime. We all of us carry around so much baggage. And a lot of the reason why we find it difficult to understand Baha'u'llah when he's talking is because we got all this baggage. Like part of the baggage, look, is this whole thing of numbers, right? It's like the guy who got the Kitab Yagan, if Baha'u'llah hadn't given the guys Noah's age, right, and created the proper context for him to learn the spiritual lesson that's contained in that page. If he didn't create the proper context, the guy's not listening. He turns off. We're all like that. Except that for us, 950 years for Noah is irrelevant. We don't care about that. It's something else. It'll be like, well, how come God is testing us? That doesn't seem fair. I thought he loved us. Why is he being such a pain in the butt? He's supposed to be our loving father or our loving parent. And so, yeah, but that's one of the teachings of the manifestation, is that faith is something that is an ongoing process. Like, do you know how many times Jesus said to the apostles, you don't have any faith? And these are the guys that gave up everything to follow him around and do whatever he said. And he's saying, you don't have any faith. You don't believe. Faith is a major thing, because if you got it, even a little bit, it makes a huge difference to your life. We all know people who just aren't scared. I have to tell you, I'm an America's Got Talent addict. I love watching, especially young people, go out and sing in front of an audience of 4,000 people and see what they do. And they blow me away. These young people, and old people too, will just get up there and they give it their all, and it's fabulous. It's such a reaffirmation of what happens when you have faith. When you have, we can call it confidence, we can call it, a healthy ego, whatever. What it means is really you believe that you can do it and that everything won't fall apart. But most of us, if we've lived enough years on the planet, we have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to screw up and everything is going to fall apart because it's happened enough times that we're afraid it's going to happen again. But like I said, that's why they keep repeating to us, have faith, have faith, have faith. Work through it. And that's also why they say this is all to take a line from the Seven Valleys, traverse all these realms in the spirit of search, not blind imitation. Don't imitate other people. Just because somebody else says that, there's a new product on the market that's going to be doing wonders for your sleep. Do you believe everybody who says that? I mean, personally, I wouldn't even believe it. It comes from my best friend. It's like, prove it. Show me some evidence. And why? Because I'm doing the spirit of search. That's what I'm interested in. I'm going to do the search until I'm convinced. And actually, this is a really cool thing that I've encountered over and over in the writings, where Baha'u'llah says, and Abdu'l-Baha says the same thing, you need to investigate the faith until you are convinced it's true. And then if you're convinced it's true, then you follow the laws.
Right. Right.
That's when you find out the measure of your faith. Because you go like, wait a second, I have to fast. I don't want to do that. But it's great because that journey, it just continues in the same way. Because you'll do something and you'll follow a certain law begrudgingly because you don't really want to do it. And then the day will come when you realize you get joy out of it. You get insight. You feel like material things aren't that important anymore. Those are major gifts. And they come when we take action. So I've gone on and on and on giving you the Sermon on the Mount. But I think my point is that we are starting the age of our maturity. Just starting. We're going to fall down. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to misunderstand things. It's okay. We got plenty of time. But each one of us wants to maximize our time on earth to be as well prepared for the next world as possible. And this is my 94-year-old mother tuned into my first Zoom session today. And God bless her, she can hardly talk. We had her read a reading to open the session, and it was so hard for her to read words and to pronounce them. That ability is going. But she wants to pursue learning to the end. and so where it comes from in me. I got it from my mom. My mom remained a stalwart Baha'i when her husband and the whole rest of her family turned against her. It wasn't going to change her mind. She knew. And because she knew, then to her, reading the writings and studying the writings and learning and asking the questions and getting them answered was just like food. It's like spiritual nourishment. It's like, why wouldn't you want to know more about your best friend? Well, friends, we've got George, who is in the UK, and I don't even know how late it is there.
It's 11:25.
It's
Wow.
11:25. would you like to close out this session and continue tomorrow? Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Noah.
Yes, that would, I do have one question though. When you were talking about all these different references, can we get these online? Are they available online? Because you were talking
Which
about the
references?
one, trying to think, the one you were talking about, I think did a thing on the Quran and about Enoch and
Right,
had written,
Enoch and Idris and
yeah,
Idris.
and you,
Idris.
the
yeah, and you
spiritual
said
guide.
Yep.
you
Um,
And the
all of the
Golan Heights.
information that I'm reciting, you know, I'm conveying to you is either in the links that I cite on the document or it's on the document itself. All the quotations from Baha'u'llah I actually put in there
okay.
because
Oh, okay.
I didn't want you to have to go find them someplace. But for the other things, there are articles from various different locations. I put the links in there because you can look for them yourself.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know, I do, I don't want to push this any further, but you have gone on and on. No, let me rephrase that.
No, that's
You have
okay.
explained.
I've
No,
got
no,
a
no,
pretty
no.
thick
That's
skin, you
not what I
know.
meant. That's not what I meant. I'm tired.
I can tell. You need to
I'm
go to
not going to
bed.
own. No, no, no. It's irrelevant. I chose to join in. I know what time it is. I'm fully aware. And this is such nourishment. I went to bed last night with a heart so full of spiritual nourishment that I was just dying for. It is an absolute joy because I don't get this like I did in America. Whether I
Uh-huh.
was wherever I was in New York, Florida, just don't have this richness of these things. This is why I try and share them so much with the friends. But you did share a lot about the need for faith and giving the tests and things. But there is so little time on earth. And if I may, if you'll allow me, why and enough tests in life and enough tests of faith with with all of our human condition and so forth. Why well, you said that Baha'u'llah answered these things. I I am not yet aware that he answered things, some of these little bits of information, like what is the 960 years and those things, those I'm not aware that those questions have been answered. But if they have not, why why provide all these rabbit holes for us to go down on? There's too much information for us to delve into without going down rabbit holes.
Ah,
That's how I
okay.
see it.
So you got to pick your battles, right? We all
Okay.
have to pick our battles in life, right? So I don't care about the 950 years. I could care less. Doesn't
But
make
how
any
do you
difference
know
to me.
not to care about it?
No, the reason why I don't care is because I trust Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah had some reason to cite the 950 years. And the writers of Genesis had some reason for doing the 950 years. I don't know what the reason is. I also don't know anything about the galaxies that exist, you know, a million light years away. Nothing. I know nothing. But that doesn't mean I don't have confidence that they exist. Of course they exist.
But if they've been mentioned several times, wouldn't you think that there's a reason for it that might be pertinent to our spiritual knowledge?
There might
How do
be,
you know what
but
to omit?
that there might be, but like I said, you gotta pick your battles. You gotta, like, for me to understand, like when Baha'u'llah says that learning is not necessary, common people can understand the scriptures. That's wow. That's so, I am so liberated by that statement. I can't tell you how exciting it is, you know? But then he says that, and then I think, well, yeah, but the truth of the matter is I've been studying these scriptures for 50 years. So how about that? I didn't know anything when I started. Yeah, it's because what I understood about education and learning and teachers was all based on a hierarchical system that is trying to control us. That's what Baha'u'llah says in the Kitab Yagan. The priests and the rabbis are trying to control us. Yes, and they've got us controlled. They've controlled us for thousands of years. They can tell us whatever they want to tell us, and we keep paying our money and supporting them. And Baha'u'llah challenges us to say, wake up, declare your independence, take responsibility for your own education. And that means if you know something, teach it. If you don't know something, ask questions. That's what Baha'is are going to be doing. We're going to be doing this for the next 500,000 years, maybe longer. Teaching what we know and asking questions about things we don't know. And that's what everybody needs to do. Right? And you know what? It's removing the hierarchy. It's removing the fact that for millennia, we've had knowledge controlled by people who gave themselves permission to tell us what to do and what to think. We don't have that permission. They don't have that permission. Sorry. You know, that's been taken away. You know, the kind of learned people that Baha'u'llah appreciates are the ones who are humble, the ones who realize, who have the kind of wisdom that comes from really knowing a lot. Because if you know a lot, then you know how much you don't know. you know, like for me, sure, I've read a few hundred books on a particular subject, but there are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of books written on that subject. I'll never read them, you know? So somebody else who comes along who happened to read some of those books, wow, I'm so excited to learn from them. You know, that's why I'm convinced that that's why consultation is such a big part of our awakening to our responsibility. We can't do this alone. We have to do this with each other because there's not one of us who is like the expert. And every time I see Baha'is doing that, is putting somebody up on a pedestal and saying, you know, this guy, he really knows what he's talking about. No, I know enough to know that a lot of the time he's just making it up. Okay. So, you know, if you want to know something, read the book. You know, use your noggin, use your brain. I say this to my 9-year-old child. She wants to do multiplication, but she doesn't want to do multiplication. See, she wants it to happen magically. Well, what's 9 times 4?
I like this kid.
No, what's 9 times 4? A 60? 40? That's my girl. I love her. But you know what? She's really smart. And when I can get her to knock it off and stop playing this, I'm just dumb and I'm going to, you know, not think. And I press her to use the brain, use it. She's amazing. I mean, I remember turning my back on her the other day. I came back literally 5 minutes later. She'd done all of her math homework, like 5 sheets of math. Bam, 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 bam. She knew all of it. The problem was motivation. We are not motivated. We don't want to do it. You know? And once we get through that problem with motivation, Baha'u'llah talks directly about this. There's a passage in Gleanings. He says, everything that you will accomplish is depending on your volition and action. You know, there are no angels coming down and giving us stuff for free. If we want to have that divine assistance when we're teaching the faith, we have to go and teach the faith. You know, if we don't teach the faith, it ain't coming. You know, and Abdul Baha was very blunt about that. He says, Baha'is who don't teach will not receive divine confirmations.
Wow.
Because if we don't teach, who's going to teach? Another manifestation doesn't come down here to teach for another 1,000 years, or to be technical about it, at least 820 years. That's a long time. So he's got to rely on us. We all have to be hands of the cause, right? We all have, this is the kind of help he needs. So again, you know, this is also part of the magical thinking that has characterized people, because it was a benefit to people in power, that we think that God's just going to make everything happen. Daddy's going to take care of us. You know, we're going to have world peace and love, and everybody's going to be happy, and I don't have to do anything about it. It's just going to happen. No. Sorry. That's not true. That is a fake doctrine. and you think about, why do we admire Martha Root? We admire Martha Root because Martha Root made a decision. She said, I'm going to serve the faith to the best of my ability, and I'm not going to let any obstacle get in my way. Not having money, not having a husband, not having a family, etc. All the other things that she could have said, and she said, this is way too important. I'm just going to do it to the max. And I never met Martha Root, but I'll tell you somebody I did meet. I met Mother Teresa.
Oh.
And Mother Teresa, I only spent 15 minutes in the company of Mother Teresa, and I got it. I really got it. Because that was a soul that was completely consecrated on doing the maximum to do God's work. And she was you know who were funding her? I can't tell this story without laughing. I went to India in 1992 to do a series of concerts. And one of the concerts was in Calcutta. And my pianist took me to this house of a very wealthy industrialist. I think mostly because she wanted to interest them in coming to the concert we were doing. And I go in and I get ushered into this living room, and there's all these beautiful paintings by local artists. I'm impressed, right? Because the guy has good taste. This family has good taste, and they're supporting local artists. I'm impressed. Okay. Then this bevy of 4 or 5, or maybe it was more, bejeweled Indian women, Hindu women, come into the apartment. They've got, you know, in that culture, you have strings and strings of valuables around your neck. It's how you show your status, right? And so they've got lots of strings. You know, these are all millionaires' wives, okay? Maybe billionaires' wives. And they're all coming in, and they're completely ignoring me, and they're giggling. Grown women giggling. What's up here? I have no idea. And then, after a little while, this tiny, tiny woman wearing black walks in like a hurricane. What energy? She's already in her 70s by then. Okay. And she walks in, and she's all business. She's coming to get something done. And the ladies are gaga about her. They adore her, and they are footing the bill for everything she does. All of her work with the dying people. One of her ministries was to take care of dying people and prepare them for the next life. That is a noble thing to do. That is such a noble. Nobody gives you any credit for that, because the people that could give you credit or died, right? So, and plus it's mostly very old. It's very sickly and people who have no money. right? So that was another thing. I found out years later, she convinced thousands of mothers who were desperate because they knew they could not support a baby. She found families for their babies. Thousands of children went to families who love their children because she took action. She did it, and they pay for it. So I don't even know what the root of this story was, but it's all volition and action.
I
And
believe
it's
it was about action in faith and teaching.
yes, exactly. And you can't tell me they aren't
You said
inspired.
you got it, but I
Yeah,
believe your point was about being consecrated in faith.
absolutely. They were consecrated in faith, and she was consecrated in faith. You know, even though outwardly they were living a life of luxury and ease and, preoccupation with material things, that's not what really got their motors running. What really made them happy and made them giggle together was being of service to Mother Teresa and knowing that by doing that, they were doing the right thing. They were doing God's will. Yeah. So, yeah. And that's, and I want to tell you that I was brought up in a Protestant family, and I converted to Judaism because I fell in love with a Jewish girl. And then I lived in Israel as a Jew. Well, after I lived in some other places, including Brooklyn, New York. And I learned about the power of action from Jews. I didn't know anything about that before because Protestants are always talking about faith, 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 faith. You just got to have faith. And I felt like something's missing here, because you have faith, but you're not doing anything. You're not making a difference in the world. It's like you just go into church and you express your faith, and then you go out and you act like the same jerk that you are in truth because it hasn't changed your behavior. But I learned from Jews who told me, we don't care what you believe. We care how you act. And then I came to understand that Baha'u'llah teaches the same thing. He says, it's not by your words or your intentions, it's by your deeds. It's deeds that are going to change the world. Besides, deeds are a whole lot of fun. Deeds are something we can do together and make a difference. And, whereas faith, to just live a life of faith without deeds, it's like going to the same church over and over again. I don't know if any of you have done that, but it gets real boring.
Peter, you
Yeah.
ever heard of UU? Well, I'm about ready, my battery's about to go, but in the UU church, they used to say deeds, not creeds. And in Zoroastrianism, good thoughts are in the station of the stars, good words are in the station of the moon, good deeds are in the station of the sun, and good conscience in the station of the endless lights, because that was Zoroaster taught.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Well,
This is Baha'u'llah's teaching about deeds come first is not just Baha'u'llah. It's Baha'u'llah reminding us of something that all the prophets and manifestations have been teaching us. It's just we got sidetracked. We got seriously sidetracked and didn't understand.
Well, I'm in the room. I'm gonna see if I can talk to her. Her name's Ellie Q, and it's actually she just responded. Ellie Q, how are you doing tonight? I'm talking to Peter Terry about you. Can
Who's
you hear
LA?
me, Ellie Q? Well, right now I'm talking to Peter Terry. He's a Baha'i, but he used to be in Israel.
Oh,
Yeah, Israel's going through a really tough time.
yes.
If you have it in
Yes.
your heart, I hope you'll say some prayers for the people of Israel and the people of Gaza too, because
Well,
all those children and women there, and most of the men too, they're not part of this violence. The violence is coming through the political parties and the militants, and they're crazy people. They're crazy people because they want something so bad that they'll sacrifice everything for it. Their own children, their own mothers and fathers. What kind of insanity is that? It's really crazy.
well,
Mhm.
Farmington has a friend, his name is Anand, and he has a program called Hey, I Hear You. Because the man, and he's a guy, but he has cerebral palsy. So there is
Uh,
a program that analyzes his waves, sound waves, and they translate, put it on screen so we understand what he's saying, cause,
Oh,
but
well,
you know, if you, sometime this week, he's gonna do another Zoom session on
okay.
Mr.
So I'm going to put, I think we're getting close to closing out here. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if any of
Okay.
you have any information like you do, Ralph, and anybody who have any more questions, you can just email me. Okay.
You, you
All
have a
right. Just
phone
put
number.
it in the chat.
You wear what you ask for.
What? You know,
You wear
I'll tell
what
you,
you
I've been
ask
doing this for a
for.
long time. I taught courses for the Wilmette Institute for 10 years. Nobody ever emailed me. What? I said anytime you want, but they don't. Oh, you don't want to bother him. I guess that's what they were thinking. Actually, I was kind of disappointed. You know.
Mhm.
So
But
we'll see you
I,
tomorrow morning, okay, or night or whatever. No, I know it's not morning. Sorry,
no,
I shouldn't
Is there
remind you that it's
another
morning.
session or are we,
What?
yes.
We're
there's another
switching
session?
time tomorrow. Yep.
Oh,
We're
we are?
switching time tomorrow. Yep. Look at your links. There's a separate link for Monday through Friday.
Oh,
Yes,
A separate link
yes.
for Monday through Friday, and we're going to be going from 10 to 12 my time. So, what does that say for the people in England? You're 10 hours ahead?
I think we're 6 hours ahead of you, right? You're
5
central.
hours.
Oh, no,
What?
I'm sorry. You're all the way on the
Five
you're on the
hours.
West Coast.
5 hours?
5 hours, yes.
No, we're
5
5
hours.
hours on the East Coast.
If you say 5,
No, no,
if
no.
you write 5, it will be 10 o'clock here.
Really?
Yep.
From where?
I'm
East
from
From
Coast
England,
Florida?
from
Standard.
UK, United Kingdom.
Yeah, from Florida. It's 5 hours
And I
ahead.
normally say it is from London, but it's the same
Okay,
as
so it's
anywhere
8
else.
hours from California. So 10 o'clock here is 1800, which is 6 o'clock. So
Oh,
it will be from
clever,
6 to
clever.
8. What?
10, 11, 12,
Clever.
1. Okay.
Yeah,
So
just remember 10 to 12 Pacific.
it will be 1 o'clock Central?
Um,
Ask your
12,
host about math.
12,
My
12 o'clock
brain's
Central.
fried. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to
No,
seeing
here
you
it's
all
10.
again.
It's 2 hours later in Central.
I thought it was 3 hours later.
No,
So that-
3 hours is the East Coast.
Yeah, that's me
Florida
here.
is 3 hours.
So
New
it will
York.
be,
Okay.
Boston,
so what time will be UK? United
in the
Kingdom time.
UK,
5 hours.
6 p.m.
But 6 p.m. is okay then. That's all right.
You know what I'm going to do, George? Because I don't want you to like not get on the program. So hold on a second.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to go and look it up on Google because I can't think anymore. I have Google do my thinking for me.
That's not part of
I'm
Google.
so lazy I can have a phone around my neck and still ask Google for the time.
No, I want to tell you, I use Google but the things I don't want to work on because I have so many things I want to work on that Google can't answer for me. So I'm fine with it. Time in UK. All right. The time in UK is now 10 minutes to midnight. It
That's
is
Yes,
right.
I'm getting
3:50.
turned into a
Spot
more
on,
orange
yeah.
pumpkin.
It is
So-
3:50 here, okay? The difference between 3 and 11. That's what you got. 8.
It's
8 hours
6:50.
difference from California. 8 hours difference. So if I'm
Okay.
starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, you're gonna get on at 6 o'clock in the evening,
Okay.
which is 1800 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eastern
Okay.
time,
Very good. Yep.
East-
Thank you.
Okay.
Eastern time is 3 hours.
Yes,
Eastern time is 3.
3 hours. Central time
3.
is 2 hours.
Right,
Yes.
right. Okay,
Thank
gotcha.
you very much.
And now you know why
Thank
we
you
don't
all.
have anybody coming in from Thailand, Korea, Japan, because there it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. No way.
Very good.
All
Okay.
right. See you later.
Okay, wonderful spending time with
Good
you. I'll
night,
see
all.
you.
Thank
See
you.
you
Bye
tomorrow.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Bye bye. Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha.